Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Afifa. I'm one of the student ambassadors of AMSA IMU and the forum director for Project Breathe. I think we're going to get started now as it's few minutes past 3. Some participants are still yet to join, but in the interest of keeping time and letting everyone enjoy their Saturday evenings, let's get going. Welcome to Project Breed's Unconscious Pandemic Inner Reconciliation Virtual Forum. This will be an opportunity for everyone to learn deep insights on mental health topics from the discussion amongst our moderators and panelists today, who share expertise in this field. First of all, I'd like to thank all of our audience for taking the time out of their weekend schedules and attending our event. In terms of in terms of some brief housekeeping rules, I'd like to point out one specifically is we ask for everyone for the next hour to remain as present as you can. Try not to multitask as it will take away from the key message we're trying to deliver. To begin, I'll ask a question. Have you ever experienced brain fogs that can disrupt our ability to focus, extreme highs and lows of emotions, difficulty sleeping or oversleeping? These symptoms, to name a few, if faced over a prolonged period and if ignored, can start significantly disrupting a person's life and lead to mental disorder or mental illnesses. But don't be scared, you're not alone. And through proper self care and with all the professional help and knowledge accessible to us out there in today's world, if we can utilize properly, we all can resolve our mental health issues and lead a healthier, happier, and stable life. On that note, we are here today to talk about mental health of Malaysia and spreading awareness in ways to improve it. With the mental health crisis and suicide rates rising every second in Malaysia, mental health cannot be treated as a secondary problem anymore. It needs our immediate attention. Thank you for joining us today in Project Breed's attempt to advocate for mental health and would like to congratulate you all for making the efforts in taking your step towards learning more about mental health by joining this virtual forum. So here's the plan for the forum. We will start with introducing our moderator and panelists today, after which we will have a moderated discussion. In between the discussion, our moderator will be incorporating a Q&A session in which our panelists will answer questions that you, as in our participants, will provide in the chat box during the event, and also some questions that we have previously collected from our social media platform. This will take place sometime in between the discussions, so make sure to stay and listen to the entire discussion throughout to follow up with those. And of course, do keep the questions coming in. There will also be a survey at the end of the event, so please do stay for that. If any participant during the event is facing any technical difficulties, please message us on Instagram or email us and we will try to assist you accordingly. All that being said, I will now introduce our moderator today, Mr. Shamir Das. Mr. Shamridas is an alumni from IMU who graduated with Bachelor's of Science in Psychology. Currently, he serves as a psychosocial support services supervisor at Health Equity Initiatives, which is a non-governmental community-based organization that provides mental health services to refugees and asylum seekers in the Klang Valley. It's great to have you on board with us today, Mr. Shamri, and I will let you take over the event from here. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, evening in between, and thank you all for joining. Thank you for the kind words, Afifa. So before we begin our discussion, please allow me to introduce our distinguished set of panelists. So Miss Wang Jingjing, she's our first panelist. She's a clinical psychologist with a vast experience of providing psychological services to children and adults with mental disorders, as well as working with individuals with interpersonal conflicts. Now, Ms. Wong has a master's degree in clinical psychology and has had her clinical training at the Health Psychology Clinic of UKM, the Psychiatry Department of Hospital Kuala Lumpur HKL, and UKM Medical Center. Welcome, Ms. Wong Jingjing.
Nice to meet you all.
Very well. Our second panelist, Dr. Juliet Matthew. Dr. Juliet is a medical officer and registered counselor. She graduated with MBBS in 1997 from Kasturba Medical College and subsequently completed her Masters in Counseling with distinction in 2015 from University of Malaya. She expertises in dealing with children and adolescents, as well as empowering women within the current society. Dr. Juliet, it's our pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Shamir.
Our third and final speaker, Dr. Philip George. So Dr. Philip George is a consultant psychiatrist and addiction specialist. He is currently a professor at IMU and was the co-chairman of organizing committee for the first World Congress on Healthy Aging in 2012, organizing chairman for the 8th Malaysian Healthy Aging Conference in 2016. His area of expertise is in adult mood disorders, prevention of substance abuse, and managing stress and depression. Welcome, Dr. Philip George.
Thank you, Shamir, for that introduction.
Thank you, panelists. You're all looking really nice today. So let us begin. So, dear audience, according to the World Health Organization, 450 million people currently suffer from some form of mental illness. In other words, roughly 1 in 4 people will deal with a mental health issue during their lifespan. Now, why look so far? Bring it back to Malaysia. According to the latest National Health and Morbidity Survey, every 3 in 10 adults aged 16 and above suffer from some form of mental illness. Now, I'm sure you would agree with me when we say words like suicide, psychosis, burnout, inability to cope have all become too familiar. So this forum will take a peek into the major issues around mental health challenges, but most importantly, focus on the spectrum of coping, all the way from the adaptive form of coping that empowers you to help you discover yourself to the other end of the spectrum, which sometimes is maladaptive, neurotic, and oftentimes leads to a loss of life. We are again blessed to have 3 experienced speakers and distinguished panelists with us today. My name is Shamir, the moderator, and without further ado, let us begin. So dear panelists, to say the last year has been stressful is a clear understatement. On top of pandemic-related challenges like the restriction of movement, access to healthcare, and the COVID-19 virus itself, it continues to be a tough season. You know, it's like that clingy, toxic partner that refuses to go away. So on a more serious note, one unique group in this population have been forced to adapt, the students. So I would like to ask Ms. Wong, is online or distance learning equally stressful for all students?
Yeah, of course. I mean, everyone in this world, not just Malaysian, we are all under the condition of pandemic, and we all are adjusting, including the students as well. So when students are learning at home, there are a lot of distractions at home, the TV or someone is cooking in the kitchen, family members just walk by or pass by. So a lot of challenges like unstable internet connection. So all these actually make students to feel more stressful when they are learning at home.
Thank you, Ms. Wong. I think especially in the Asian cultures, you know, your parents just barge in your room. Hey, Adik, you want to eat? So even that alone is so stressful for all of us. So Dr. Juliet, same question to you.
Yes, actually, I live with 2 students in my house, my teenagers, a lovely teenager and a handsome young adolescent. So I can understand, although we give them all the privacy, all the students, without barging in and busybody.com mothers, we still find there's a difficulty because it's just different. You know, you don't have a recess time with your friends. You don't have discussion. You don't have your peers with you. It's a totally different world. So I think, yes, there's a lot of issues that we need to address when it comes to studying from home, however comfortable it is.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Juliet. I think the overlapping theme was that on top of the multiple challenges faced, there's so much uncertainty, you know, especially by these students, and we have to acknowledge that. So let's move on to the working life. You know, Dr. Philip George, does the uncertainty of employment affect everyone on the corporate ladder?
Yeah, I mean, there are different stresses that people go through, and depending on our resilience, we either can cope with these stresses or we may falter and, you know, have difficulties with the challenges that are ahead. Of course, if things are expected, then it may be, you know, easier if you decide, okay, I'm going to maybe, you know, retire from this job and move on to another job, and you made your plans and you've sort of rehearsed them in your mind, then it becomes easy to move to change and to adapt to new, sort of environments and things. But when things hit you all of a sudden and you've lost a job out of no fault of your own, then it actually triggers a whole host of different emotional and psychological reactions. And so people may be caught unaware. So I think it's important for us to realize that some of these things that are thrown at us are not at our control. And it all depends on how we build our own resilience in dealing with some of these things as well.
Thank you, Dr. Philip. I like how you focused on also, what can we do about it? Since we can't prepare, so how do we react? And that's precisely what this forum is going to look at, with all three speakers to look at coping and even the resilience. So let's jump a bit now to something a bit more technical. So common mental disorders, unfortunately. So that refers to depressive and anxiety disorders. And it's different from, the typical feelings of sadness, stress, or fear that any one of us face at any point in life. It's devastating and unfortunate that it is common. So I'm going to pose this question to all three of you. How can one tell that their anxiety has escalated into an anxiety disorder? Maybe let's start with Dr. Juliet.
Yeah. In understanding what anxiety is in the first place, it's just that it is just a recurring intrusive thoughts or concerns, right? So when you know that these thoughts or concerns are becoming more repetitive and taking over your life, it is taking a major part of your life, then you know that it's getting a little bit out of order. Yeah. Every one of us has anxiety. Every one of us, and different personalities, as you can see, have different forms of the extent of anxieties. But when you know that it is ruling your life, it is taking over your routine, you can't do the things that you've been doing all this while because of these anxiety moments, which are more, then you know it's becoming a disorder, right? You know that you need to do something about it.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Juliet. So Ms. Wong, would you care to share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Dr. Juliet mentioned an important point. So when I would say major life functionings are affected. So for example, students, their work, their study is affected. For adults, their work is affected. Or other major life functioning like social life, their sleep, their mood are already affected. Or the anxiety has already caused distress and impairment in all these life functionings or most of the life functionings, then it rings a bell for all of us to seek for help. Besides, for different disorders, of course, there are different, in clinical setting, we would say there are different diagnostic criteria. So in terms of the number of symptoms that you have and the duration that you struggle with all these symptoms are also the way that we can tell whether the anxiety has become a disorder or not.
Right. So on top of, the overlapping point seems to be like functioning and affecting your life to the point where you can't control. So Dr. Philip George?
Yeah, basically it's all in a continuum. So, we all experience stress in our lives. And if we don't actually, maintain stress at an optimum level, which enhances our performance, because no stress means you cannot perform. You have to have some stress, but that has to be optimum. The moment it goes beyond, then we go into breakdown and, and all the other host of psychiatric problems can arise. In that continuum, onwards will be anxiety. So if we don't take care of our stress and we don't manage it properly, we actually then trigger off anxiety. If that anxiety is prolonged, it is, meets certain criteria, because there are 5 different anxiety disorders. So if it is episodic, comes and goes, and it's really acute, then it may be a panic disorder. If it's related to an object or an environment or a situation, there may be a phobic disorder. Or if it's just continuous, then it may be a generalized anxiety disorder. So depending on criteria that we use, we can identify what type of anxiety disorder it is, and the duration, it will also determine. But the biggest difference is an anxiety disorder has to impact on day-to-day functioning. So if you're falling out of your academic function, your relationships, and that's prolonged, then it most probably points towards a disorder, which is an illness.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Philip. I think because majority of our audiences are students, and I'm sure many of them can relate to what all of you are saying, not necessarily the disorders itself, but, experiencing anxiety on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's very well put by all three of you, affecting functioning as well as depending on the specific type of context to which it will be pinpointed to a specific anxiety disorder. So one question that has been coming more than 3 times actually on our social media, and I think it's also relevant to the preventive measure. What can you do to prevent anxiety disorder rather? So the question is, what is the relationship between automatic thoughts and anxiety? Let's start with Ms. Wong.
All right. I would say it's just like a hot cross. Okay, a cross. So our thoughts, feelings, body sensation, and behaviors are all correlated. So when I mention about thoughts or automatic thoughts, it can be any kind of thoughts, words, images that pass through our mind. Okay, and it will affect or it will correlate with our feelings. For example, I feel worried, I feel anxious, I feel scared. And our body sensation is how you feel in your body. Your body sensation, my heart beats fast, I start sweating. All these are the anxious body sensation. And our behavior is what do you do with it? Okay. So the relationship between the thoughts, feelings, body sensation, and behavior is like a correlational relationship, I would say. So one will affect another. So for example, if I have the thoughts first, majority are students, right? I think I will fail the exam. So I start feeling very anxious. So the night before, my heart beat faster, I feel stomach ache and things like that. Okay, so this is how the thoughts, feelings, or body sensation and behavior are all correlated.
Thank you, Ms. Wang. I think the example you gave as well, relevant to everybody, all of us have experienced that. And when you take a step back and you can see that relationship, that correlational relationship, as you say. Dr. Juliet, care to shed some light?
Yeah, negative thoughts or automatic thoughts. I'm going to pay attention to the negative thoughts here because it's more prevalent among students. Ms. Wong gave an idea about the exams, but generally as students, and I was a Wayne student before, it's about what the others think of us. How do we look? Am I too fat? Am I too thin? Am I fitting in? Am I smart enough? Am I doing well? These are all some examples of automatic thoughts. So negative or distorted thoughts that come in, they automatically make us feel a bit anxious, depressed, frustrated, So this is what we mean by automatic thoughts leading to anxiety. Yeah. So it's common to have this again and again. I must say that it's not a disorder to have this kind of thoughts because we always have that peer pressure and want to do well. But it's how we deal with it. That's what we're going to learn today as well. That's important.
Thank you, Dr. Julian. I think it's very important to explain also, what is automatic thought, because the word sometimes it's self-explanatory, automatic. So good that we know that now it's not a disorder. So I think we have a question in the chat. Let's see. I have a question. In your opinion, what do you think has contributed to stopping or preventing people from seeking help to mediate their mental health? Christine, that is an excellent question, but I'm going to pause you right there. This question is actually covered later towards the end, so we'll take it later, yeah? Okay, back to us. So now let's jump into a little bit of depression. Depression is always known to be a psychological illness. It's not really covered by insurance. It's always known as the lazy illness. And parents sometimes blame their children. You are lazy. I wasn't this depressed before. So we had a very interesting question through our social media. What are the effects of parents having depression on their children? So Dr. Philip, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there are two different ways that can influence children. And one is, of course, the genetics of depression. So if there is a family member with depression, there is an increased risk of hereditary passing on of the illness to the offspring. But the risk is only about 5%,
right,
meaning 95% is due to other factors. So I think that's why it's important when you're young to actually identify from your parents, what are your genetic risks? Does your dad smoke? Do you have a risk of addiction? Does your mom, have anxiety? Is she always anxious about things? Would that mean you have a risk as well? And then put in the tools that you need to make sure that you're that 90% that doesn't develop it. I mean, you take the proactive steps, and that's promotion, mental health promotion and prevention. So, I mean, that's one aspect. So there is the heritability, but then there is the learned behavior. So it can be a learning. You're growing up with maybe somebody who's always morose or depressed and always looking towards the negative evaluation of things, as what Dr. Wong and Dr. Juliet had mentioned earlier as well. The automatic thoughts that you are living with in an individual can also be spread on. It can be contagion. And you can have those automatic thoughts and make you at higher risk of developing depression later as well.
Right. And I think especially, children, they are so innocent, they're a blank canvas. I would think that they are more vulnerable to just, catching up on these negative thoughts, right, Dr. Philip?
Yeah, but I mean, again, it's just one factor. So there are a multitude of factors. So you can't just pinpoint one thing and say, oh, it's my dad's fault, I'm like this. There's 90% of you, things that you can do, that environment can do, that everyone else plays a role. So I think, when we do understand it, we need to take that active role to know what is under our control to change.
Very well put, Dr. Philip. So to focus on what we can control, because 90% is a lot that we can change. Yeah,
absolutely.
So, Ms. Wong, same question to you. What are the effects of parents having depression on their children?
Okay. In my clinical work, what I notice is when parents are having depression, how it affects the children is the parent-child relationship and their bonding are somehow affected. Okay, because when parents are struggling with depression, they are very struggled with the problems that they are facing, the challenges, the mental challenges they are facing. So a lot of times they love their children, but because of these struggles, they may accidentally neglect the emotional needs of their children. So when this happens, it may affect the emotional well-being of the child, and it may, in future, it may also affect the interpersonal relationship of the children. Okay, because when parents are struggling with depression, they may show less affection towards their children, and this is something that they don't do it purposely. It's because they are struggling as well. So this may happen as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Wong. I think you acknowledge a very important point that their intention is not to hurt their child. They love their children. Thank you. I notice a lot of questions coming in the chat, guys. Please keep it coming. We will try to address it as much as we can. We've just started, and I'll try to slip in where I can. And to answer Stephanie, yes, it will be recorded and posted on YouTube. So you can share it with your friends who've missed the session or go through it again. So Dr. Juliet, same question to you. What are your thoughts?
I echo what Dr. Philip said. It's either acquired, and that's just 5% I find out today, thanks to Dr. Philip, or it's a condition, you live with it. You have lived with a condition where it's normal that your parents are always depressed. And then again, with like what Ms. Wong said, you get so used to it, you grow up with no interpersonal relationships, and affects your future as well, with your relationships with your peers and your future spouses. So yes, and again, we have to work hard on the coping mechanisms.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Juliet. I like how we have different perspectives, of how to view this depression, which has now become very common. I'm going to take one question now. Anybody can answer, okay? Afternoon. I'm a young working adult. I just came out of depression. I'm still taking medication, but am much better now. Question: how do I put together don't take yourself too seriously and having grit, working hard? On one hand, I need to sleep more for health, but on the other hand, I want to try working as well. Anyone?
Well, maybe I can start.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the important thing is to have a balance. And that's really essential in life's journey throughout. I mean, a famous psychologist said he actually described our life as 4 main domains, like the 4 stilts of a kampong house, and each stilt is important. The first domain is love and being loved. And maybe you're out of a relationship, you're feeling sad, and so that domain's not very strong. But the second domain is your academic or your career. Now, if you're not doing well in studies, then you got 2 domains gone. Your house is collapsed. Your house is falling down. But if that's going okay, then you can cover for that first domain. Your third domain is your recreation, hobby, and exercise. Things that you enjoy doing. That's not the mundane, stuff that is expected out of you because of what society says. And finally, it's the network, your friends. You're not an island. You've got all these other people that you're connected with, not on social media. You don't know who the hell's talking to you, unless you're familiar with them. There could be somebody posing as someone else and telling you things which, but you're real friends, So I think it's important to assess these different domains. And if you put all your effort into that one, pillar and say, I want to work on, building myself to be the best employee, and you neglect everything else, your house will still collapse, even if you're on antidepressants and you're well. So make sure you've got equal effort, energy in every pillar.
Thank you, Dr. Philip. I think that's very well explained. I really like the analogy, just to back yourself up with other support. When one thing is down, just build, channel the strength there. Thank you, Dr. Philip. So let's take another question before we move on to coping. From Jane. From what we know so far, certain amount of stress is good for us. How can we differentiate between good stress and bad stress? So maybe Dr. Juliet, do you want to answer this? Because you smiled first.
No, I smiled because I thought there's another question for Philip again. But
No. This is your area.
So how can we differentiate good and bad stress? It's actually very individualized. Yeah, we need the good stress. We need the identify what is good stress, because that's the propelling force that makes us work, that makes us get up from the bed and do stuff and move forward. Yeah. So differentiating what is good stress and bad stress, it's what's draining you. Which stress is killing you, which stress is overwhelming you. And you have to identify that. Now, we cannot list out this is bad stress, except, of course, the physical symptoms the doctors always nag about smoking and alcohol. Yes, that's bad stress to your body. But what's overwhelming you, what's taking a toll on you is bad stress. And it can be different. Your sister, your brother, your friend may be able to handle it, but you can't. Then it becomes a bad stress for you. So it's really individualized. And feel free to help me here, Philip.
Well, I think, Wong, did you want to mention something?
Yes.
I think Dr. Juliet covered most of the good points. Maybe I can add on one point is regarding the duration. So in my opinion, the good stress, or we call it eustress, is most of the time is short term, short term. And the bad stress or the distress is usually can be long term or short term. So you can assess yourself based on this. And also another point that we mentioned earlier on in the forum is about the functioning, whether this stress affects the functioning or not. This is a very clear point that can help us to differentiate.
Yeah, so if I can add as well, I think there were famous researchers from a long time ago, Brown and Harris, who actually described different stress points for different events in your life. So they listed from 10 to 100 events in your life that can trigger stress. They gave a score for each of these events. Right. Getting married is good stress, but it scores 50. Now, if you're getting married, you're moving house, you're buying a new car, you're changing job, you are scoring maybe 50 plus 30 plus 20 plus, you have got maybe a hell of a lot of stress on you. Just as bad as 100, which is death of a loved one. So like it or not, stress, whether it's good or bad, can have an influence on you. Of course, you want to have more good stress, but you got to pace it. So when you understand this, that it can have an impact, okay, look and see how you can pace these different stress events in your life, at least the ones that are under your control.
Thank you, dear panelists. Very interesting engagement, and I like how you put it all into perspective. Thank you for answering the question, and Jane has thanked you all as well. So let's jump into coping, shall we? So we've spoken a lot on the issues. We've touched here and there of anxiety, stress, and depression. But now let's focus our lens on one form of coping that oftentimes is very stigmatized, is high taboo, and in some cases, some countries, illegal: deliberate self-harm. So self-harm can also be called self-injury or deliberate self-harm. So Ms. Wong, is self-harm a cry for help or a form of attention seeking? I know it's not a black and white question, so feel free to answer it how you'd like.
Right. Okay. So this is like what Shamil, you mentioned. There's no direct answer to it. There's no black and white. The way I view deliberate self-harm is a way that people cope with their emotional struggles, the pain that's inside. Okay. So when we mention about coping, there are helpful or unhelpful coping strategies. So definitely this self-injury is the kind of unhelpful coping strategy. So instead of try to analyze or judge a person that you know they are harming themselves, instead of analyzing and judging them, you are doing this to seek attention, or you're doing this for what kind of purpose, I would say it's important to show your love and care, okay, as a family member or as a friend, okay, show your love and care when you know someone has this kind of self-harm behavior, and try to listen to them, listen to what kind of struggles they're facing, and try to encourage them to seek for help. Because a lot of times when we show our love and care to someone, okay, they feel safe, they feel secure to talk to us. And there's also the time that you get to know more about the person.
Thank you, Ms. Wong. I think that's also pretty much the first thing we learned in Psychology 101, be non-judgmental. It sounds so simple, but like you said, it really takes us a long way. Dr. Juliet, what are your thoughts?
The word that I would like to use here is unconditional love. Yeah, unconditional. Whether it's cry for attention or not, the fact is it must be taken seriously. These ideas of self-harm, whether they're cutting themselves or whether it was a attempt, it must be taken very seriously. And the unconditional love, I have a few mothers under my care as a counselor, and it's very difficult to deal with this. Yeah, it's very difficult to deal because you're like walking on thin ice, wondering when is the next attempt? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? But the real word here is the child needs you. The child needs to be heard, and it must be taken seriously. So I would consider all not as a cry for attention at all. I will look at it at the extreme other end and deal with it in that way, not in a matter of dealing with the child as if the child has some issues, but in the perspective of taking it seriously. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Juliet. I think that's very well shared, and it's not easy. They're clearly going through something. So this is a question that also came up on our social media for all three of you. It's easy for us to sit and say, suicide is wrong, deliberate self-harm is wrong, that is not the right thing to do. But like Ms. Wong said, it is a form of coping. So I would like to pose this question. How does inflicting pain on oneself help them cope? Maybe we'll start with Dr. Juliet.
Yeah, it's that feeling. The way I see it, some of them cut themselves. It's like a form of numbness that they have, that they need to feel that pain, So it's like it begins as a defense against what's going on in the family or their lives. So in this way, they get a bit of control. And teenagers and students, sometimes certain personalities, they like to be in control, not directed.
Yeah.
And if there are studies saying that these are more among the perfectionist students or the overachievers, but it's simply a struggle that they're going through and a coping strategy for unhappy kids. They feel, when they cut, they feel. It diverts their numbness, the depression. So it's something that we can't call just a phase. It's something like exploring, yes, but comes in the perspective of how dangerous it is, just like doing drugs or smoking and such. So that's the way I see cutting and self-injury here.
Thank you, Dr. Juliet. Dr. Philip, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the terminology that we use often is parasuicide, which is different from suicide in the fact that parasuicide is not intending to die, whereas suicide, the intention is to die. Typically, these are still symptoms. They're not an illness. You don't have a, self-harming diagnosis. It is a symptom of another disorder. So, for example, in Malaysia, these recent months, we've seen an increase in suicide. And that's a symptom of maybe psychosocial distress. You've lost a job, you have debts, you can't cope, and you can't feed the family, you kill yourself. And that's a psychosocial disorder that needs to be addressed. What's a psychosocial disorder? We need to provide people with support. We need to provide them jobs. We need to get them, so we deal with that and we can reduce the risk of suicide. Parasuicide is also a symptom. So if you can't cope with stress, that's and maybe a disorder. If you were born feeling abandoned and feeling not wanted or low self-esteem and little things trigger you, that's not normal emotions. That's a disorder. And if you can't cope with that, then you may think about doing things like self-harming because you've tried everything else. You try to go to sleep, try to talk to someone. The more you talk to someone, they say something and you feel more sensitive and you get even more frustrated. And so it is a disorder that you have to attend to and then learn new ways of dealing instead of, looking at harming. But yeah, I think the important thing is to understand that it's a symptom of a bigger problem that needs to be attended to.
Thank you, Dr. Philip. I think that was really interesting because, to building on upon what Dr. Juliet said is when they feel this realness, so this would be something much, much bigger because nobody would want to end their life just like that, right? There's so many compounding factors behind it. Ms. Wong, what are your thoughts on this?
I think just like what Dr. Juliet and Dr. Philip mentioned. So on top of what Dr. Philip mentioned just now, the coping or they try out different ways to cope already, but nothing works. So people tend to turn to self-harm behavior because it provides immediate relief from the inner emotional pain. But a lot of times, actually, people they know that it's just temporarily. So, for example, some of my clients they will say things like, "When I cut myself, when I feel the physical pain, it takes my inner emotional pain away." Just like the numbness that Dr. Juliet mentioned. And for example, a lot of clients will mention things like the overwhelming feelings is up to a point or to an extent that I really can't take it. I really need something to bring me back to the reality. So these are the words or sentences that my clients will say. So they would say, by doing this, it helped me to feel alive and things like that. So, I mean, it's actually very, it shows that the emotional struggles and the pain that a person is experiencing.
Thank you, Ms. Wong. And I think all of you have really shared some very insightful thoughts, which I'm sure will definitely help us elevate and deepen our understanding of deliberate self-harm, parasuicide, and suicide. So I would like to give a scenario. This scenario was also requested by our social media, and we will go around from the panelists. A very common one, actually. A friend suddenly calls you and says that they intend to take their life. How do you respond to such a mental health crisis? Anyone can go.
Yeah, I think the important thing is if they have reached out to you, then they most probably trust you. So you're given an opportunity to be a liaison. Of course, if you're not trained in psychiatry or psychology or counseling, I wouldn't suggest you start counseling them. Don't start telling them life is better, a lot more things to look forward to. That's not going to help. It's important to take them seriously and say, look, I really want to try and help you with the little bit that I can do. How about we look for professional help? I can support you through this. I can maybe get you some numbers. You want to maybe get a helpline, or I can even come with you to see a professional, or help you to make an appointment. Now you become the liaison person, which is the most that you can do unless you're trained in psychiatry or psychology or counseling,
Right.
But I think on top of that, if you think that it is real and that it is posing a danger, you have the responsibility to actually inform. And you can break confidentiality. There's no such thing as you have to keep your word and not reveal this, but you need to inform family and the authorities. So,
Thank you, Dr. Philip. Would anybody else like to go?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Philip here. The important thing is, I mean, of course, I'm wondering how this phone call is made so that, can I use my other hands to chat and WhatsApp immediate family members, please
Right.
get there as soon as you can, or
Yeah.
tell my other friends, go knocking on the room door, see what she's doing. I'm thinking of all that as well.
Yeah.
And the important thing here is that it needs to be reported to the immediate family members, to the immediate support group. There's no rule of confidentiality here. Yeah. And like he said as well, unless you're really trained, you might even just send them hanging further because you're
Right.
saying the wrong things. Are you stupid? What do you think? And stuff like that, So the
Yeah.
best is to provide active listening, support, and report it to the family members. Now, this friend of yours who has reached out, like Dr. Philip says, loves you or trusts you and enough to reach out to you. And breaking this confidentiality might break that relationship. But you still have to do that. You still have to get that support for this person.
Thank you, Dr. Julia. Ms. Wong?
I think Dr. Julia and Dr. Philip have already covered most of the points. So I think once I receive the phone call, I will just check with the person their location first. Okay, and I mean, Dr. Julia and Dr. Philip have already mentioned about there is a need to break the confidentiality if even if the person asks us not to inform anyone. But before breaking that confidentiality, I would say check with them. Is there anyone I can call on behalf of for you? So a lot of clients, they will say things like, I don't want to let my parents know. I don't want to let my family members know because they won't trust me and things like that. So in this kind of situation, if you are the friend who receives the call, you can say things like, okay, then how about I call on behalf of you? So we get the consent from them. So this is something that you can try out before breaking the confidential as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's also really true, Ms. Wong, because one thing that all of you brought up was, yes, it's okay to violate confidentiality, but ultimately the ball is now in our court. The duty, the responsibility comes to you as a friend, that one phone call to do something. So for those of you who are listening and for those who put the question, it is not wrong to reach out for help to, the next of kin, friends or family, because ultimately your goal is to be a good friend and to make sure that this person doesn't do something just in that instantaneous reaction. Thank you, panelists. Okay, let's move to another very interesting form of coping, which involves alcohol all the way to marijuana, substance abuse. So I'm aware that Dr. Philip is an expert in the field, but the rest of you, please feel free to provide your thoughts as well. We've seen different perspectives coming in from interpersonal to biological to psychological. So it's a very rich forum already so far. So as a mental health professional, why do you think that despite people knowing or they are aware of the health risk that substances pose, why do they still succumb to its temptations? Dr. Philip?
Yeah, so there are many factors for why people start using substances. I mean, the moment you ban something, it becomes more attractive, right?
That alone, yeah.
So, you're not, just because someone says it's banned, you're put in jail for this, that people are going to stop trying or using. In fact, for some people, it becomes an attraction, especially those who may have some personality traits, those who are impulsive, those who are risk takers. Not everyone drives on the road at the normal speed. Some guys drive like maniacs, and that could be part of their personality.
Right, right.
So we're all born different with different temperaments.
Mhm.
But we need to again go back to the basics. What are we carrying with us? What genes do we hold? Are we at risk of actually becoming regular users? Because, of course, 90% of young people who try a substance don't become drug dependent. But there's the other 10% who most probably have some risk factors like family genetics or their own mental health burden or their trauma that they experienced when they were children. And they're using this substance now to cope. So, typically, I think it's important to know your own risks and then say, I think I better stay out of that group that wants to try something.
Right.
I might actually get into this a bit more seriously and I can't get out, But yeah, otherwise, I think most of the time it's the curiosity, it's impulsivity, it's also the peer pressure, it's also trying to overcome, different emotions and not in the appropriate way. Because, as usual, boys are more reserved in their emotions and feelings and don't talk about it. So they're the ones who outnumber everyone else in terms of substance use. They think that's the way to cope. But girls are a bit more smarter and they talk about it and tell their friends or, seek help early. And so they don't get, too involved as boys would do. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Philip. Ms. Wong, would you care to shed some light?
I think Dr. Philip has already covered most of the points. Just like the self-harm behavior, in terms of the substance abuse, a lot of time people tend to use it as an immediate and temporary relief from the struggles that they are facing. Because when they are intoxicated, they will share things that when they share with me, my clients share with me, they will say, when I'm intoxicated, I don't have to think about the problem that I'm facing. I don't have to feel the pain that's inside me. So a lot of times when clients with addiction issue come to me, have to work on the coping skills that is more helpful for them.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Wong. Dr. Julia, anything to add?
If I may add, it's a lot of influence as well. I mean, of course, it starts as something like what they said, experimenting, and then there's a bit of peer pressure because you go out with your friends and then they're drinking and you're not drinking or smoking. Then you are the odd one out, the scaredy cat or you're too scared to try this kind of peer pressure is there. But to me, I feel that the high that we get out of this, that high, that feeling, that rush of, I can own the world with this just one drink and I feel so all right with this. In addition, there's the influence from the media. If, the Black Widow is smoking and she looks so cool, then I want to smoke and cool as well,
Yeah.
So the pressure is there from all levels. Yeah, it's not just because most of the students that have come to me for counseling, it's not that they had any issues or sadness or depression. They just experimented. They just tried and then they got hooked onto it. Yeah. So that's another aspect where we need to see as well, peer pressure, influence from others, that we need to address as well.
Right. Thank you all. I think you all have very comprehensively covered that it's not only internal factors, but there are also things happening around us. And we should definitely try to be more aware of it. So, under what circumstances can an addict overcome addiction himself? Anyone can go.
The statistics suggest 5 to 10% can recover on their own. So that's just like our cancer recovery. 5% of people recover from cancer without even seeing a doctor.
Right.
by chance, maybe it's a miracle, maybe you prayed a lot. But that's not treatment, right? So usually when you have an illness, which is defined as a whole year long of continued substance use and 3 criteria out of 7, that means you fit the criteria for drug dependence. That's an illness. You need to look for treatments that can help at least 50% and above. We focused in the past on treatments like punishment, which was also about the same result as trying to cure it yourself, 5 to 10%. You put a person in Pusat Srenti for 2 years, release him after that, 90% go back to using drugs. But counseling, therapy, medication through healthcare actually has 50% and above outcome responses. Not everyone recovers. I mean, if you've done 1 year of drugs or more, and you want to try and recover, it's a long, arduous task. You need to put the effort and energy and time, but people do.
Very hopeful, Dr. Philip, but like you said, it doesn't come easy, yeah?
Yeah.
So anything the other panelists would like to add?
I agree that while most of my patients with addiction I'll send to Dr. Philip without thinking twice, there has to be a multidisciplinary approach. There has to be counseling also for the caregivers, the parents, the friends who are supporting, how they need to deal with this, and then peers. So it's got to be a multidisciplinary approach. We can't just put everything on Dr. Philip's head.
Got it, Dr. Juliet. Miss Wong?
I think, it's really challenging based on the statistic, whether a person can overcome on its own, the chances is really, really low. But when we look at the recovery process or the treatment process and individuals' awareness, their insight and the motivation to overcome this also play very, very important role as well. And the family support, the social support are very important, because even after they stop using drugs, a lot of them will use it back. So the family support and the connection is very important. If the connection is still back to the social circle, friends who are still using drugs, that the possibility of using back drugs is really high.
Thank you, Ms. Wong. I think you highlighted a very important issue, that is not only about the individual, the person who's using the substance and recovering, but also the support of oftentimes the family. Thank you very much. So, dear panelists, let's move on to another topic. And this topic actually did come up a few times on our social media as well, in the form of eating disorders. So the first question is, how significantly do you think the rampant body shaming in society has contributed to the prevalence or severity of eating disorders? Open.
Body shaming is quite another common issue with students and young adults nowadays. They spend a lot of time worrying about the flaws in their appearances. Yeah? And while they may not be any flaws that's noticeable, they feel that there is. And yes, you are asking if society has contributed to it. Very much, very much. In our Malaysian society, the first few things you do when you see someone is, hey, you've lost weight, hey, you put on weight, And it's a common thing, we all go through that. And this era, where again, there is a lot of media influence and every young girl or young man wants to look fit and pretty and, shapy, and the black widow is the world to them. This kind of comments will ruin your day. Yeah. So we cannot go around blaming society and telling them, stop it, don't do this. But the idea is to actually empower our students, tell them that it's okay, it's all right. It's okay to binge a bit and then, because exams are nearby, it's all right. That's the idea that we need to instill in our students.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Juliet. Would anyone else like to touch on the topic?
I think the body shaming in the society really affects how people perceive their appearance, perceive their body shape. Because when it comes to eating disorders, it's really about an individual's perception towards their body image, their appearance, and then later it will affect their self-esteem and things like that.
Thank you, Ms. Wang. I think, yeah, you guys brought up very important points on how, yes, the control is important, but there are some things we can control, and we can't control the society. So
Yeah.
focus
So maybe if
on,
I can add, Samir,
Go
actually,
ahead.
one of the things in eating disorders, I mean, imagine a child or a teenager. There are very few things that are under their control. I mean, they can't control their allowance, how much they get. They can't control what's going to be put on the table for dinner or lunch. I mean, unless you have a lot of influence in your family and you call the shots. But most of the time, parents are going to decide, right? What clothes you are going to get for Christmas or what you're going to wear and what you're going to, so the one thing that you can control is how much you consume. And sometimes it is a cry for, I want to be in control. And so I'm going to do this. And so that's what triggers very often anorexia, where, they stop eating. They may hide and lie and cheat and, throw their food out or exercise double, triple, take laxatives and, maybe even do enemas and exercise, crazy, because all of that is under their control and they can show in their emotions, all right, you keep bossing me around. In school, I get bullied. At home, they get shouted at. Well, I'm in control now. And I'm doing this to overcome, that other factors. So it doesn't necessarily have to be what community tells them. It can be sometimes the internal way. So sometimes it's a multifactorial thing, and it's important to identify what is actually triggering me to do this in managing my, is it healthy? Is it a good way of coping? And maybe instead of this, can I work on something else in terms of my relationships? And, so I think there are multiple factors that can influence really.
Thank you, Dr. Philip, Dr. Juliet, and Ms. Wong. I think, like you said, identification is important, that awareness, and even the three main topics we've covered so far, eating disorders, deliberate self-harm, as well as substance abuse. These topics are highly stigmatized, and sometimes we don't talk about it as much. So, hopefully by discussing it and just sort of addressing the different factors, internal, external, society, family, that there is an increased level of awareness, and every single person listening here, and probably those who watch the video later, will have more understanding of these unhealthy or maladaptive coping mechanisms. So let's jump to the other end of the spectrum now, to the healthy, as people say, healthy coping mechanisms. So there's always this notion that, all of us mental health professionals, we are supposed to practice what we preach, So self-care should be on the top of our list because we tell people how to care for themselves. So it only makes sense that we do it. So all of you, what is self-care to you?
So maybe if I can start by just going back to that same 4 pillars of your, Malay kampong house. I think, how much effort, time, and energy you put into those 4 pillars is exhibition of your self-care. Those are essential domains. Of course, put in there as well your own physical and psychological well-being. How much time do you spend? I mean, I hope everyone here brushes their teeth in the morning, but how much of time, because that's for your dental care, how much of time do you spend on your mental care? How much time do you spend on breathing exercises or mindfulness or meditation or journaling, or what investment have you put into your mental health? And why wait for an illness and say, oh, okay, now let's learn what meditation is about? So I think it's just like brushing your teeth. You learn it when you're a child. Learn mental health skills as a, as a young person as well.
Yeah. I agree with Dr. Philip. The question of what self-care means to me, with my clients, people who come and see me for self-care, I feel it's a very individualized thing. One shoe doesn't fit all. I cannot do art therapy with everyone and ask everybody to take a walk in the jungle and come back. It's very individualized. So I feel that each one of you out there, students, you need to find out what works for you. What works for you, what helps you to cope during this time. And that helps you may not help your friend, may not help others, but you have to find out what helps you. For me, self-care means calling up my good friend and chit-chatting and ventilating. I did that last night as well, calling her and telling her, oh, this person did this and blah, blah, blah. And then after that, I felt good. So self-care to me means having someone to talk to, someone unconditional to just listen to me ventilate, you see. So I suggest students, you find what helps you, yeah, and see how that can bring you back to the routine. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Juliet. Ms. Wong?
Add on to what Dr. Juliet shared, some of my clients may ask me the questions and ask things like, Ms. Wong, I'm not sure what works for me. I would recommend every one of you to try it out. Try this. There's no harm to try it out. Okay. If you don't know where to start from your hobby and interest. So this is the area that I always ask my clients. If you don't know where to start, so what is your hobby? What are the things that you like to do? Any interests? And start from there and try it out. And there's no harm if you try jogging and it doesn't work for you, then you change. And it's okay.
Yeah. I just like to add to that. I think that's excellent. But there comes also a duration of time in a day that I tell my clients that you have to make it your time. It's like the me time.
Yeah.
For you to explore what helps for you. It's just with you yourself. Yeah, in adding to what Ms. Wong said excellently.
Thank you all. So I think, Dr. Juliet and Ms. Wong say, just try anything. Start with your hobbies, allocate that time for yourself. But like what Dr. Philip said also, don't wait till it escalates. Self-care should begin right now, especially more so during the pandemic when there's so many stressful things happening. So there is also this question of how, there's this stigma where, yes, males don't often express, Asian cultures don't express, and generally people don't know how to face negative emotions. They like to bottle it in, they like to displace it. So how do you think we can be comfortable in dealing with negative emotions in a healthy way? Let's start with Ms. Wong.
I think it's about our understanding and perception towards the so-called negative emotions. Okay, I personally think that we should acknowledge all sorts of emotions that we have, including the negative ones, because we are human. None of us here are feeling happy 24/7. If there is one person in this world feeling happy only all the time, then it means something. Need to see a psychiatrist or psychologist already. Okay, so we want to normalize the negative emotions as well, because we are human and positive and negative feelings is part of our life. Okay, and it's very important for us not to remove or ignore all the negative feelings immediately. But it's about learning how to live with the feelings, acknowledge the feelings. So for example, I'm very anxious about the upcoming exam. And this is how I feel right now. I acknowledge how I feel. I can feel very anxious while preparing for the exam, while I'm studying. Instead of I'm feeling anxious and I need to remove these anxious feelings before, once I remove the anxious feelings, then only I can study. Then you will get stuck. So actually these two things can exist together. This is how I view the negative emotions.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Wong. Dr. Juliet, care to share your input?
Yeah. In bottling all these negative emotions, I always tell my clients, my students as well, that the more you sweep it under the rug, the more you topple over that carpet and fall down. Leave it open. Let people see that it's okay. Any emotion, anger is an emotion. Not just joy and laughter. Anger is an emotion. Frustrations are emotions. Crying is an emotion, and it's good to do that. Yeah, so don't bottle it up. Don't say, oh, I cannot cry. I cannot get angry about this. I cannot feel frustrated or anxious. Every emotion shown is a reaction to how you're coping with it. You know, um, of, of course, it all boils down for me to someone to do it with, you know, to be yourself with. You need a support or yourself if you think you can do it, but show that emotion. Don't bottle it up.
Thank you, Dr. Juliet. So I'm also looking at some comments in the chat, and I think everybody is really on the same page. You know, Ahmed says some would think it's a luxury to have self-care and not a necessity. And that's why, to echo what Dr. Philip say and Dr. Juliet and Ms. Wong, make time for it. You know, make it a necessity because you have to do it. So self-care is also very broad, and one common area of interest has always been art. You know, there's this fun fact about Pablo Picasso, the Spanish painter, who said that he could draw before he could walk. And his first word was the Spanish word for pencil. So some people are gifted with art, but let's put aside talent, let's put aside skill. How does art assist in coping, you know, beyond being a distraction? Anyone can answer.
Yeah, well, actually, I work in a clinic where we actually have an art therapist. So she sees clients and she's an art psychotherapist. So she analyzes their work and then, you know, works through psychotherapy from their, you know, what they've actually been doing. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be good at it to get the benefits of art therapy. There are different things in art therapy. I mean, one is, it is, you know, it is what you call a buffer. So it manages stress. I mean, just painting something or drawing something or doodling actually just takes your mind off. It's a diversion for your daily hassle, stress, and anxiety. It works for some, it may not work for others, you know. So again, as I think Wong mentioned earlier, you have to, you know, try them out and then see which is suitable for you. You know, some people may say, go and do Tai Chi, do acupuncture, do this, and you don't like Tai Chi or, you know, feel you want to be out in the sun, then yeah, maybe it's not for you, you know. But if you haven't tried any of this, then how can you say you're helping yourself, you know? So yeah, there are numerous different complementary therapies that are very effective for managing stress, for preventing anxiety and depression, or complementing all the other treatments. And I think we need to learn to engage in some of those, which we feel comfortable doing, you know?
Yeah, very well put, Dr. Philip. And you know, one, like we were discussing, one shoe doesn't fit all.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Dr. Juliet, what are your thoughts on this? How does art assist in coping?
For me, I use a lot of art therapy with my clients because it lets me get into their world. You know, a simple drawing of a house, tree, person, and you find out a little bit about their personality, and then you enter their world. And sometimes this advocacy that I use to ask them to draw in front of me, especially with students and younger children, gives them that vibe that, oh, I used to draw when I was small, you know, and it was so relaxing. I used to love it. And then it creates a certain coping mechanism for themselves, you know. And then we draw and give homeworks like, how about you draw me something like this for our session next week? And then they'll come up with interesting pieces of work that I usually put up on the walls of my
Oh, nice.
yes, you know. So that creates that interest. Drawing, putting down your thoughts in a paper helps you have time to yourself. You know, it's a very good way of releasing whatever your thoughts are into paper and creating something. So yes, I believe art therapy is a very good form of therapy for most of my clients. It works for me, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Juliet. So also one issue that, you know, Dr. Juliet, you mentioned earlier about coping and, you know, healthy self-care was talking to people. So there's also this question, you know, yes, we love to talk to people, we love to ventilate and be ventilated too. So I would like to pose this question that also came up to us on our social media. For those who are rendering help as friends, you know, we tend to get emotionally involved. What advice would you give to these people to help them draw boundaries and to prevent sort of caregiver fatigue in that sense?
I tell you, this is very common, because Philip, you've been there longer than me. As long as you're a psychiatrist or a psychologist, you are the best friends in many functions and parties because everybody asks you things. And then you start sponging it, My sincere advice, no matter what they think of you, draw the boundaries. Yeah, draw the boundaries. People who seek help with me, sometimes I tell them, make a session, make an appointment. They don't like to hear that because that means, oh, I have to see her in a clinic. But that's the way I take care of myself, right? Because if you're sponging every other person's issues and giving them advice and telling them how to deal with it or just listening, you are going to just get so drained out. So the one word that I advise everyone is friends. If you think you can't cope with it, don't even enter into it. Draw your boundary. Tell them straight off, I don't think this is my field of expertise, or I don't know how to help you here. Be here as a pillar of support, but I think we need to get you more help in this field. Draw your boundaries. If not 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m.,
Sounds a lot like a lot of experiences, Dr. Juliet.
Yeah, boundaries. That's my word for that.
Dr. Philip, what's your take?
You're muted.
You're muted, Doctor.
Yeah. Sorry, what? The question was on how to build boundaries. Is that what it is? Or?
Yeah, especially for people who are helping their friends, listening to their friends. So how do they draw boundaries?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is you need to maybe explain to your friends that you're not the professional. Know what you can and cannot do. If you are trained in counseling, then yeah, that's fine. But otherwise, counseling is not something that's, an easy task. And, without training, you actually may make things worse. So the first step is actually explain to your friend, I'm happy to hear, these things that you want to discuss with me, but there's only little that I can do in return. But, ventilation is a therapy. Someone talking about their problems, actually, it actually helps them to overcome a lot of emotional, distress because of it. And they might find their own solution. By talking about it, they actually can view it in a different perspective and maybe find their own solution. So as long as you inform them of the boundaries, then I think there's no harm in listening and saying, look, I hope you get through this. I can maybe look and see where you can get help for it and provide you that information. But I sincerely hope you get better, and I'll pray, or, whatever else that you can personally do as well.
Thank you, Dr. Philip. Ms. Wong, anything you'd like to add?
I always remind my clients, family members that be clear about their role. Okay, what does it mean? You are playing the role as a companion, as a person who supports, or you are playing the role as a doctor or psychologist or counselor. Okay, this is important for the family members or for the friends to take care of themselves. Because, for example, if your family members have cancer, okay, what would you do? And do the same thing when you are supporting a friend with severe depression. Okay, don't try to cure them, but just be there for them. Okay, a lot of times I hear from the family members, they will share with me things like, oh, I don't know why she just keep crying, complaining, and keep thinking about something negative. I've already tried my best to tell her not to think so much. So I will always remind them, hang on, are you trying to cure? Are you trying to treat? Or you are trying to support? So be clear about the role that you are playing. So even for me, myself, when I'm supporting my friends, I don't provide therapy for my friends. I remind myself I'm playing the role as a friend instead of I'm playing my role as a professional psychologist.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Wang. And I hope that this answers the question and probably reinforces all of us, to establish boundaries and to redefine our boundaries, because we also have to care for ourselves. And as the famous saying goes, you cannot pour out of an empty cup. So, dear panelists, I've reached the last question actually, and after this, maybe we can see if we have time for more questions. And this question will address toxic positivity, where in the sense, we should not have to pretend that everything is okay when it is not, right? So what is the difference between non-toxic acceptance and validation versus toxic positivity? What are your thoughts?
I think it's about whether we are able to recognize and be aware about different feelings. Okay, just like what I mentioned earlier on about no matter if it's a negative or positive feelings, whether we are able to acknowledge the existence, how I feel right now, right here, and don't rush to ignore the uncomfortable feelings or brush it off. Okay, so when it mentions about acceptance and validation, it's about whether you can allow that comfortable and uncomfortable feelings be there, yet we are still able to live a life that is meaningful to us, doing things that's meaningful to us.
Thank you, Ms. Wong. Would anybody like to add?
Yeah, well, basically, we all have defense mechanisms. I mean, when we go through stress, there's some sort of defense that we need to utilize to cope with that stress. Most of it is unconscious, learned from our many, experiences in life and childhood experiences, and maybe our temperament and maybe even genetics. But, some people are more negative. So if they have a bit of stress, they may trigger off being very negative and angry and irritable. Some people are maybe positive, and when they have stress, then they look at the positives of it. They look at the silver lining. Some may go to the extreme and be over positive, which can trigger things like mania or hypomania, and that's an illness. So we typically in mania and hypomania, people are trying to overcome, perhaps even falling into depression, and they try and compensate, but they overcompensate and become hypomanic or manic. So sometimes the positivity we need to identify, but again, it's good to have some level of positivity. I mean, it's a seesaw. In the end, you want to be a little bit on the upper end. And if the upper end is positivity, you're in a better space. You can cope with what life throws at you. But if the upper end is negativity, throw in the pandemic, the next face mask, and vaccines coming late, you're going to be flying off the seesaw, right?
Agreed, Dr. Philip. Very well said. Dr. Juliet?
Yeah, to me, I address toxic positivity like this. When wanted to have these talks on depressions and anxiety for the youths in my church long time ago, a churchgoer came and told me that those days, well, I got depression, anxiety, all this one, all too much, these people, the students nowadays. So I'm thinking that if at home you're growing up hearing that, when you are reaching out and telling people that I feel sad and I can't cope with my peers, or I feel left out in school, and they are, just generalizing it and pushing it under the carpet again. Yeah, those days we all also had the same thing, like, come on, go to school, do this, do that, generalizing it. That is toxic positivity. You think you're doing a great deal, but you're actually just covering it up. And like Philip said just now, this is going to make it worse. It's going to create more depression. In fact, it's going to grow into low self-esteem, like my parents could do it, my brothers could do it, I can't. So something's really wrong with me. So toxic positivity is something else that we need to deal with that shouldn't be there. Every person needs to be heard, however small or little or trivial their problem seems to be, it needs to be heard.
Thank you, Dr. Juliet, and also everyone for sharing your thoughts. It's very important that, we address this. And like you said, too much of something is not good. And maybe we'll take one question and then we'll take a group picture. So there's a question from Christine earlier and was supposed to be covered. What do you think has contributed to preventing people from seeking help to mediate their mental health?
The stigma. Everybody looks down at you. Oh my God, you're seeing a psychologist, you're seeing a psychiatrist. It's the stigma, the talk of the town. Oh, this person, even students, can you not put it down in my report that I'm seeing a counselor? Why? Because, hey, if you're seeing a counselor, ooh, you have a problem. It's the stigma.
I think,
Yeah. Sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
Dr. Philip, go first.
No, I was going to say, I think the cost is another issue because in Malaysia, sadly, insurance doesn't cover mental health. Although the same insurance company covers mental health in a different country, but not in Malaysia. Yeah, it's bizarre. It's you have multinational insurance companies that cover mental health in Australia, US. They come to Malaysia and say cannot cover. So it's prejudice. It's even the people on top are stigmatizing. Healthcare itself is stigmatized. I mean, look where psychiatry units are. Most hospitals are not part of the main block. They're put far away in a dilapidated old building. The staff are few, the resources are less, and even the wards are decrepit. It's terrible. So when the system itself stigmatizes, prejudices, and has taboo, then the general population will have the same. I mean, I'm sure it'd be easier to go and see a BOMO than see a psychiatrist, right?
At this point, looks like it.
Yeah, in fact, you might spend the same amount of money.
Thank you, Dr. Philip. Ms. Wong?
Yeah, I was about to mention about the cost as well, because it's really quite expensive in a private setting. And even with current pandemic, a lot of people are jobless. So I would like to share with all of you here that don't forget, help is always available. So for example, right now, Mercy Malaysia, they have a lot of services available, free online therapy. They have hotlines. So these are or even some NGOs that provide discounted price for people with from lower socioeconomic status. So always seek for help. If you can't go for the private setting, then go for the NGO or from the government hospital.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Wong. Clearly we can see that there are so many barriers, but hopefully talking about it and addressing it here will, eliminate certain barriers we have inside us, that fear and supporting your friend, the stigma, and so on. So I'm going to pass it very quickly over to Afifa and her team for the group picture, and then we'll come back for closing statement.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shawer. So hey guys, hope you're enjoying. Before getting to the questions and concluding, I would like all the participants to turn their cameras on for a commemoration picture for this event. Thank you. We'll give it another minute.
There's a message that the camera is disabled by host.
Oh, Janice, could you?
Yeah, sorry for the technical issue. I already able it, so maybe you guys can try again.
Hey guys, so nice to meet you.
Do let us know if you guys are having problems turning the camera on. We'll give it like about a minute more, and yeah. By the way, you guys are doing amazing. Great discussion for real. I think, Billy, we can take it now.
Okay, on the count of three, we're going to do this, all right? 1, 2, 3. Okay, I need to take a few more for the next few screens, so please bear with me. Okay, give me a while. Again, 1, 2, 3. Okay, sorry, 2 more screens. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and one last one. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you so much, guys.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll pass it back to Mr. Shamir. Thank you.
Thank you, Afifa. I've never been one to be comfortable with silence. That few minutes was nerve-wracking. Anyways. Okay, we have a question in the chat. It's an anonymous question. My parents often fight at home since the lockdown, and it's become more frequent at least once a week. And since now everything has been online, class and stuff, it's greatly affected my attention, my mood on my studies. And although my parents said don't bother about them and focus on your studies, I can't keep myself isolated since we're staying at home. Plus, my mother always talks about wanting to commit suicide and talks to me about negative thoughts. I feel frustrated and anxious. I feel like my mom's having depression. What can I do? I feel like there are a lot of issues here, so feel free to pick which one you'd like to address, panelists. Anybody can go.
Yeah, I think first thing is, again, the child cannot be the therapist, right? There are boundaries in families as well. Some of those boundaries get broken because the family unit is not actually working like a family unit. That's no fault of you, and that's, something that may happen in relationships and in families. So first and foremost, I think you need to realize, okay, well, what are your responses when your mom is talking to you about all her negativity and everything? And the main thing would be, look, mom, I'm not a therapist. You need to find help. I can maybe suggest and help, and I got some social media groups that I can get the information for you, but I cannot be the person to help your mental health issue. The second is, you've got stress. Well, and then look at what your buffers are. What are you doing to deal with your stress? Yeah, in the period without the pandemic, of course, you had going to college, your friends and everything else. What can you incorporate into your life now? I mean, the MCO doesn't restrict us to just being in the house. We can go for our walks. We can go for our exercise. We can maybe take our, book and sit in the porch and read. We can move, our location and be in a different place in the house. So there are different things that we can engage in that may also support and help in this process. Yeah. I think that's a little bit of what I can suggest. Maybe the others have more suggestions as well.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Philip. To the person who wrote this, I would first and foremost like to say that I feel that you're in a very terrible position, and it's very easy for us to say, do this, do that, and move on. But you have to remember that this is not about you. This is not about you. This is about adults who are having difficulties coping with this situation. So this is not about you, right? And reach out to whoever you can. The theme here is that you should not be the parents here. Your roles should not be reversed. So you should not be the therapist. And I agree totally with that, with what Dr. Philip said. You have your task, you have your journey. This is not your fault. Reach out to as many friends or other counselors or whoever you can to talk about this. Because coping with this is going to be difficult for you, but you still need to. Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Wong, would you like to? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to this friend, I mean, it's really tough to face this kind of situation because we are all at home and you are in this situation facing this all on your own. Okay. If there's any other adult that can help in your family, do reach out to them. If there's no one who can help your parents, okay, you don't have to help them, but just search for help for yourself. Okay, reach out. I know you can't, we can't go out, or our I mean, it's difficult for us to travel at the moment. Just call the Mercy Malaysia, talk to someone if you have no friends to talk to. Of course, if you have friends that you are trusted, talk to them. Okay, express yourself. If you don't want to talk about it, do something that you like. Okay, and don't bear this responsibility. All right.
Thank you. Dr. Juliet, you was going to say something?
I also have learned that sometimes voicing out your opinion counts, telling them that this is affecting me. I need to go on with my studies, or this is affecting me. Just voice it out. Sponging and keeping quiet sometimes also, they think that it's okay, you're all right, you're just taking it. And you said your mom comes and talks to you about it further. She seems like she needs a pillar as well, So it's good to just voice it out. Family is there to listen. They should voice it out.
Thank you, panelists. And yeah, to the person who asked this question, I really hope that this provides you with some help. And we're sending all the strength, support, and love we can to not only you, but every single person out here who's struggling with issues related to mental health. So, dear panelists and dear audience, we've come to the end of our forum. I'm just going to go one round around the panelists so you could give your closing remarks. Anything, any last words, any words of advice, words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us on this evening. Let's start with Dr. Philip.
I keep putting my speaker off. Yeah, I want to thank the organizers for a very well organized event. And Shame, you've done a great job moderating everything. And really privileged to have wonderful panelists with me today. I think I would like to maybe echo some of the things that we did describe earlier. And that is that you need to take charge of your mental health. Don't put it in the back burner, just like, the policies of the country have put psychiatry and psychology as the most neglected area of medicine. You don't need to do that in your mind. You need to maybe make it a priority, whether you have an illness or don't, or your family has a problem or don't, you still make it a priority, because you'll notice that the more effort and energy you spend on it, the better it is for you in your whole life, So yeah, I think, we invest in your mental health, basically.
Thank you, Dr. Philip. Let's move on to Dr. Juliet.
Yes, actually, it's been an honor being here among so many of you, such an accomplished team, to come up with a mental health forum like this. I'm very honored to be here to give my perspective. I want all of the participants here, the young adults here, to understand that the perspectives shared on my part here is not just as a medical officer, doctor, or a counselor, but as a mother of students as well. Yeah, so I would like you all to just learn this. If there's one take-home message from me, it's that you all should just accept who you are. Accept your limitations, accept your flaws, accept that you're not perfect, but grow within your strengths. Your silliness, your quirkiness, your beauty, your humor. Accept who you are and grow with that. Grow with that, but know your boundaries as students. There are rules, yeah, and make mental health a part of your life, good mental health a part of your life. And that's the journey that I wish for all of you, not just your physical health, but mental health.
Thank you, Dr. Juliet. Ms. Wong, last word.
Thank you, Shamia, and thank you for having me today. I'm really glad to be able to share my 2 cents in this forum. Okay. I mean, mental health is no longer a taboo topic. Okay. I mean, it's really important that we take care of our mental health. I know that a lot of people out there, you might feel like I'm unsure whether I have the need to see a psychologist or counselor or psychiatrist or not. I'm struggling with this and that, but I'm not sure whether I'm at the stage of disorder yet or not. Okay. If you are at this stage, I would say just reach out, just see a professional, get an assessment. Okay. Because prevention is definitely better than cure. All right. And just like what Dr. Philip says, it's very important to invest in your mental health. Okay, I wish everyone all the best.
Thank you, dear panelists. Very, very beautifully said. You know, I was reminded of this quote by Glenn Close. What mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, and more unashamed conversations. So thank you, Amsa, for providing this platform for that. Distinguished panelists, thank you so much for your opinion. You know, we had different experiences, different perspectives. And to all of you audience, thank you for asking questions, being active. A recording of this will be available on YouTube. And for those whose questions were not answered, an email address will be given. So you can email there and it will be passed to our panelists. Thank you all. Thank you very much. I will pass the floor back to Afifa.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shamir. I would like to express my gratitude towards all our panelists today, Dr. Juliet, Dr. Philip, and Ms. Wong. Great job on the session. Thank you for managing to take out time from your very busy schedule to attend this event and share your expertise. And of course, last but not least, thank you, our moderator, Mr. Shamir, who led today's discussion in a very, very effective way. You did an amazing job in making it a very interactive and like enjoyable session overall. Virtual standing ovation to all of you for making this event run so smoothly. I personally actually, I felt that I learned a lot from this discussion, and I'm sure that the audience feel it too, but specifically the part that resonated with me the most is, you know, how like in today's day and age where social media just highlights sort of, you know, the positive moments of everyone. So it makes you feel like, oh, you're the only one suffering, you know, but I guess the realization that everyone has good days, bad days, or, you know, life is just about the balance, and accepting that, I feel like accepting that concept on itself is very freeing. So yeah, I would like to also thank all the participants for your attention and your questions. Hope you all enjoyed and learned skills to improve your lives. And yeah, basically that was our ultimate goal for this event. So we do hope that you did learn skills. And yeah, we have received a lot of questions, but unfortunately due to some time restrictions, I guess we were only able to answer few. So if you still feel that you have more questions and you would like to have them answered by our panelists, please send them in our emails, and the answer for those will soon be posted in the highlights of our Instagram platform. So do keep an eye out. I would like to also thank our Project Breathe team and of course SAMSA IMU who supported in making this event possible. Please do reach out on any of our social media platforms with any inquiries. Thank you once again for joining our forum. And at the end, like next slide, you will see a QR code to a very short survey, which we would like for you to take a couple of minutes and fill it up so that we can get more feedback on how to improve our future events. As Mr. Shamir says, the recording of this forum will be available on YouTube soon. So yeah, please do feel free to share this with your networks if this helped you. Thank you so much. Hope you guys have a nice rest of your day. Take care.